Just as a heads up, this is a new recording setup for me. I'm now recording on my Mac. I normally record on other devices, etc. So apologies if the recording quality has hiccups. But what I wanted to dive into today, something a little bit different for me. I've kind of touched on it a little bit in my channel here. It's about uh, a process or an idea for a process around playing solo RPGs. So if you've looked at my channel, I don't have a huge amount of content around it. You can see if you browse around my channel that I often cover things like solo board gaming, adventure gaming, things like that. I do have a Tainted Grail solo RPG playthrough on here, but solo RPGs have been a thing that I've been interested in for a really long time. I started my adventure RPG journey with tabletop role playing. I've mentioned this in some of my other videos, but I've always run into some issues. Just a lot of this may be me personal stuff, but if you've ever explored solo role playing, you might notice that there are a lot of tools out there like Mythic GM Emulator and, solo modes for different tabletop RPGs, and including this one that I have on my screen right now, Legend in the Mist, which is one of my most anticipated upcoming tabletop RPGs. But for me personally, I've always run into challenges with this process because if you watch a lot of people do solo role playing, people like Me, Myself, and Die, one of the YouTube channels that became very popular for it with games like Ironsworn, I personally feel like there's two major things that come up for me. One is, and this is a critical one, that a lot of the onus of being the game master, the narrator, whatever you call it, is basically just shifted directly from the game master to the player when you're doing solo role playing. It's basically like you need to be a player and you also need to be a game master. That can be a lot of mental energy. It can also just shift the focus from your role playing to trying to think up what's coming up next in the story. And me personally, I enjoy storytelling, but when I'm sitting down to get immersed, when I'm sitting down to play and role play, I prefer to play through an adventure and sort of like discover things. I know that things like Mythic GM Emulator purport to help with that by providing sort of prompts, but usually the prompts are pretty vague. It's oftentimes sort of like keywords, and you have to go through this, or at least me, I have to go through this mental gymnastics to try to figure out what does that mean in this context, etc. And part of the purpose for that is because these GM tools are meant to be agnostic to any type of tabletop gaming system you might play. Now, on the other hand, if you have played any games that have built-in sort of solo modes, like Forbidden Lands has one that's at the end of one of their books, or Legend of the Mist, I've been exploring the early renditions of this, and it has a really nice solo mode. One is each of the solo modes is completely different for each of these games, and oftentimes they still rely very heavily on generic oracle roles, etc. That still, for me, make me feel like there's a lot of onus on the person to do the storytelling, which for me distracts from role playing again. Then, so that's problem one, is sort of the onus that's put on the player, the solo role player, to do the storytelling as well, and to, I mean, I've been a dungeon master. I'm sure many of you have that are listening. It's a lot of work. You have to do a lot of story planning. You have to constantly be thinking on the fly of like what's happening next, what's interesting. So it's a lot. The second problem is that every time you want to play a new game, part of the joy of solo role playing is you can be like, okay, I'm going to pick up Forbidden Lands today and I'm going to play this, or I'm going to pick up, I don't know, Symbaroum, or that's another free league game, D&D, or Legend of the Mist, or any. You can try out all these different game worlds and game systems, but there's a big onus. I mean, obviously, one of the big roles of a dungeon master is that you have to go learn the entire rule set and all the mechanics and everything for every one of these games. So that can be a lot. And then you have to take that rule set, which is different for every single game, and think about, okay, but how do I do this in a solo role-playing context? Like, oftentimes the systems are not really made for solo role-playing. They're very mechanically focused. Where, for me personally, again, everybody may get their own thing out of solo role-playing, but I don't think most people I've encountered that do solo role-playing are there to do like hardcore tactical combat or anything like that. There's plenty of games where you can do that in a solo context. I think most people that do solo role playing are somewhat interested in the role playing storytelling aspect of it. So these are the things that I've kind of encountered as big barriers for me personally to get into solo role playing. And I've spent a long time trying to think about it. I've explored different you know, building tools that can act as sort of an AI to do the dungeon master's job. But there's all sorts of challenges that come with that, and different considerations around AI in general. So anyway, this is my big preamble. This is what I've been struggling with for probably years when it's come to solo role playing. I've definitely dabbled with it. I've had some success in different areas where it's more structured, but the more structured a system is, the more you're like rolling on defined tables, the less free it is, and that sort of takes away from the feeling of what's joyful about role playing, which is that you can do anything, which is what separates it from, if I want a structured role playing experience, then I have tabletop role playing games, etc. All the board games that I post about on this channel. So that's the big preamble. So where am I today? I wanted to share an approach that I've been toying with. It's definitely not fully cooked, but I just wanted to share thoughts and start potential discussion about a couple things that we might be able to put together to create a sort of portable solo role-playing system that could be used with a number of different settings, books, etc., to focus on the role-playing and exploring a world side of this hobby with not that much ramp up, not that much prep involved with the player. So I'm going to walk through what I've been doing here, and I'm curious to hear what you all think in the comments. I'm going to try to not keep this video super long, but I'll walk through the idea. So it basically comes down to a few different components, and each of them is meant to solve one of these things that I just mentioned. So I'll start with this because this is what's on my screen, Legend in the Mist. Why am I bringing this up? One of the main reasons that I'm attracted to Legend in the Mist, for those of you that don't know what this is an upcoming, it's in development but coming out soon, role-playing system. And one of the things that makes it special is that there's a very straightforward narrative-focused way of playing the game that is incredibly simplified from most tabletop role-playing games. If you're not familiar with the system, I can explain it in a couple of sentences. There's a 600-page series of 2 books that go into how to apply this to a million different settings, but the core concept is really simple. Let me pull up a character sheet here so you can see what I'm talking about. So this is an example character sheet for Legend in the Mist, and basically everything about a character and most of the game comes down to these tags here. So I'm not going to go into detail because that would make this video quite a bit longer. But the idea is that your entire character sheet, your entire character concept is built of these particular tags where you're basically saying, okay, this is a character from my campaign, Joker, who's kind of like a master swordsman, but has a very kind of lighthearted nature and is the companion, the NPC companion of my main character, Darthus. So you can build these sort of theme cards around aspects of their personality or skills that they have, etc., that capture in a narrative way all the things that you might capture with the more nitty-gritty like stats and skills and things like that, but it focuses on the narrative side. So, for example, the jovial disposition is here, and then you have these tags like knows people's happiness, life of the party, cheer them on. And then you have weaknesses with each one of these themes. You have a weakness. So like austere people don't trust him because he's jovial. Then each of these can have a quest. So like what is he? What is the part of this aspect of him that is going to be a motivation for him? So here's laugh at despair, maintain humor and optimism even when faced with overwhelming odds. So you get like this. This is a summary of like role-playing stuff for this character, but it's actually expressed mechanically in the game. When I do something where his jovial disposition or these different tags would come into effect, you basically add a bonus to the die roll. And that's basically the entire system. He has one of these cards for being a formidable weapons master, and you get to put some story tags related to that, masterful parry and riposte, or lightning flash reflexes. And so what does combat look like in Legend of the Mist? You literally are trying to hit somebody with your sword, and then you apply any tags that would apply to that. It's like this narrative abstraction of what you're doing with all the dice and things in Dungeons and Dragons. You're sort of saying, okay, what of my attributes, my story tags apply to me trying to hit this person, and your success on that roll then allows you to apply statuses to them, the enemy, like wounded or something like that, to try to defeat them. So I'm not going to go through everything that there is here about Joker, but you can see that there you have these sort of 4 themes, and then you build story tags around those concepts. So just in this one page here, you have a character concept, you have role-playing tips, you have a sort of distillation of everything that's about this. You could imagine any character in any role-playing game, whether it's Blades in the Dark or Vampire or whatever, where you can consolidate down the primary skills and abilities that make them special, and also the things about who they are that might not be expressed in skills, but their personality and things like that, which often are expressed in like statistics in most role-playing games. And you can build these narrative tags that then whenever you're doing something in the game where these tags are evoked, you get a bonus. Or, interestingly, you also, this is not often expressed in most role-playing games, but the weaknesses are also like essential to this. And you actually you evolve your theme and level up your theme when you invoke your weakness. So it encourages you to also roleplay the negative sides of your character. So it's an incredibly elegant system that allows you to express a wide variety of things narratively and still get mechanical bonuses for them. So it feels like when I'm trying a challenge in this area, the fact that I know these things or I am this way benefits me and I do it better, which is really most of what role-playing is trying to do, and all the complex role-playing systems about bonuses and armor classes and all that stuff. You also have like backpack. I think, do I have a backpack tag for this person? I don't, but my other character, Darthus, does have a backpack tag of like an item that is meaningful to him. So it's this tattered childhood doll. So again, I could go on and on about Legend of the Mist. There's more to it. There are statuses and stuff, but the core essential of how it works is very straightforward. And what I like about it is it applies to any activity or game where you're doing storytelling, where you have a character with abilities and attributes, where you're doing storytelling. So this system is liftable and applicable to any RPG setting or book that you would want to play in. Of course. Okay, so I'll pause there. So the reason I'm bringing this up and why I think this is important for this discussion is because one of the barriers I said to role playing in different settings, like if I want to go play Forbidden Lands, I have to learn every single thing about the Forbidden Lands system, the survival mechanisms, the hex crawling, the camping, how does combat work, what's the dice pool, how are characters created. The amount of ramp up that you have to do to be able to play in that system is very high. What this allows you to do is you can take this Legend of the Mist character concept, you can make a character in any system, and it flexes to your knowledge of the system. If you know that survival is really important, or you know aspects of the world, you can just integrate those in as tags into your settings. So like if your guy has a bonus in camping for some reason, you can put that as one of the tags, and then you can do, okay, now we're going to camp, and so I'm going to make a test to see if we camp successfully, and let's see what tags apply to this. So you can take it as far, you basically decide in Legend of the Mist when a check is necessary. So you can make it as granular and detailed or as high level as you want. So this is my first proposal, and this is the thing I'm trying, that I believe that this, for somebody like me that doesn't care too much about like the mechanics of dice rolling, the strategy of role playing, but more cares about creating character concepts and role playing them in a world, but having that character concept and their abilities matter to the world, I think Legend of the Mist, as far as I've found, is the best thing I found so far. So that's my one proposal, is that we take Legend of the Mist and we use that for the character concept and the adjudication of roles and sort of the gameplay mechanics of any system. So if I've lost you there, okay, I understand. If you really enjoy solo role playing because you want to like use the systems in each of the games and learn those and stuff, then you're already well served. You don't have to do this. But this is if you're like me and you want to be able to pick up a new role playing system quickly and just be like, okay, I want to just start playing. And as I mentioned, the more you learn about the game and that particular system, you can integrate it in this idea. Okay, so let's hold that for a second. That's actually, for me, somewhat the simpler part. I've thought about this for a long time, that Legend of the Mist system could be applied to a bunch of games. But the harder one, for me, that's been hard to shake is, okay, what do we do about the lack of a game master? Um, if I'm, trying to run any sort of adventure in Forbidden Lands or Dolmenwood, a really expansive hex crawl, how do I do that? How do I lift some of the burden for me being the game master? So very recently, I came across this system called Unfolding Machines. There's a series of three of them: the Plot Unfolding Machine, Scene Unfolding Machine, and Game Unfolding Machines by Jansen Vars is I believe that's how you pronounce the person's name. It's here, Jansen Vars is the person's name that created these. And again, I'm not going to go into extreme detail on this because this could be its own whole video, and maybe I'll do that one day. But the idea with the unfolding machines is that you're basically it's like mythic mythics, oracles, and prompts and things like that. But for me, plus plus. Instead of feeding, the whole reason he created this system, as far as I understand it, was because Mythic was too vague. It still put too much onus on the player to do a lot of the storytelling. So what is different here is that the especially for me, the core of these three, plot, game, and scene unfolding machines, the plot unfolding machine is the does most of the work. The Again, I'll keep it at a high level. The idea is that you have tables that it rolls on, which are very concrete, much more concrete than the prompts of mysterious water or something like that, where you have to try to figure it out. It'll basically be like, no, this is what's happening. But it has this same concept that Iron Sworn and others have, where you have sort of a story arc that you're moving through, so it keeps you moving. Okay, we're at the start. We're now we need to start moving into some sort of conflict. Then we're gonna have some resolution. So it keeps track of where you are in your narrative arc. And the big magical thing about this is that you add on elements that you either know or are part of your story to the tables. So for example, here you can see an example that they've added some gamer world elements about their particular game that, they're aware of you or expecting you, abandoned, left behind, worthless, things like that, or relevant encounters or characters that might show up. So the idea is where Mythic just gives you these very generic responses, this will sometimes be like, this character shows up, or this aspect of your world is activated right now. So it integrates the elements that are specific to your game and your adventure or your world into the things that are fed to your plot. So you don't have to think about that. It's the systems are passing you back stuff that is relevant, which for me, in what I've experimented with, it means that aspect of what happens next. One, it's way more concrete, and two, it's way more directly relevant to your story. So again, this could be its whole own video. It took me a while to kind of get to grips with the different things. I'll be showing it a little bit here in a second. I'm using this plot unfolding mechanics companion, which is goes way above and beyond. This is almost like a full virtual tabletop for solo or GM-less role playing. Can be used with the GM too, but it really walks you through all this stuff and builds your your narrative and stuff. So that's my proposition here, is that you, with these two things, I'm whenever I see people do a solo role playing video and they pull out 5 books of tables and stuff that they like using, I get overwhelmed. I tried to keep this concept really straightforward and simple. But for me, the idea here that I can have a portable rule set that can be applied to any system with Legend in the Mist, in terms of how you build a character, how you handle challenges, essentially the mechanics of the game. And keep in mind, this is just my thing. If you want to use other aspects of the game, you don't want to use Legend of the Mist elements, you can use some of it, or you could pull in certain mechanics. But I'm trying to provide a formula here that is plug and play. And then as it relates to setting up your story and driving the story forward and figuring out what happens next and all the stuff that a GM would do, you have the unfolding machines. So it's just those two things. Legend in the Mist for characters and systems, at least the bare bones part of it, and then the unfolding machines for running the adventure. So that I'll leave that there. That by itself, I think it's a very exciting proposition of how to approach a portable solo role-playing structure that you could apply to really any role-playing game system. Now, for me, there's still a bit more here than some barriers to entry. So let's think about that for a second. I'll show you the Plot Unfolding Machine Companion real quick. It has a really nice guided setup here. So let's say, as an example, what I'm doing here, you can see I have a little story here with Wraith and Joker in the Forbidden Lands. So I'm trying this out in the Forbidden Lands setting, which is a setting I've really wanted to explore. It looks really beautiful, really rich. There's all these setting books, things like that, a beautiful like hex map, etc. I've really wanted to explore this world, but I've just been held back by the complexity of a lot of the systems in Forbidden Lands. It's really focused on like survival mechanics and it's very unique. I think it's called the Year Zero engine combat system. And I've heard multiple other people say this as well, that it's a barrier for them to get into this really awesome seeming game. So I'm giving this a try. So when you come in here, the first thing you do to prepare a game is the app version of this walks you through doing all this. So you sort of put down your plot scope, you put down what are these individual game or world elements that are unique to your game or your world that are going to be fed back to you. What are some potential obstacles? What are useful findings? What are some pending questions you have about what's going on in this world or in your story? Who are the important characters, etc. So you could totally, this is designed for you to do this yourself. For me, this again is a small barrier, and I think a lot of people love this. A lot of people come into solo role playing because they're like, I want to do this. I want to be creative and like make my own world and think about like all the things that could be happening. That's great. This will support you in doing that. The system that I'm gonna discuss here allows you to do this, but it also allows a little bit of that burden of world building and some of the things again that a game master would do to be taken off of you, and makes the system even more portable. So what am I referring to? It is to use a tool which again many of you may or may not have run across, called NotebookLM. This is a service by Google. It's free. As far as I know, you can get like a pro version that allows for more stuff, but what it basically does is, how does this differ from like a ChatGPT or something like that? The main difference with NotebookLM is you load in sources. You can see all my sources over here on the left, and you can put in a ridiculous amount of sources. If you had on ttRPG bought like all the source books for a particular system, you could load them in here. I think it can handle like up to 70 PDFs or something like that. And then when you're talking to it, it is sourcing all of its answers directly to the sources that you gave it. If you ask for something that's not in those sources, it will say, I don't know, I don't see that, which is a place where ChatGPT and stuff often fails. It'll just like make stuff up or so this is a very powerful tool. How am I using it here? The idea is basically, if I load in the Unfolding Machines PDFs, so I have here Game Unfolding Machine, Plot Unfolding Machine, Scene Unfolding Machine, and then I load in Legend in the Mist, so it has a concept of what Legend in the Mist is, how characters are created, and then I load in some setting documents, so like the Forbidden Land Game Master's Guide, the Player's Handbook, Book of Beasts. I have the Raven's Purge campaign in here. It then has all the components to know how to apply the system that I'm describing. But how does it know how to bring these together in a way that I just described? Well, I've written up a little document here. I actually brainstormed the system by putting in Legend in the Mist, the Unfolding Machines, etc. into NotebookLM and just kind of said, would this work? What would be involved? So I had it sort of create a structure here about what would be handled by Legend of the Mist, what would be handled by the Unfolding Machines. Honestly, I don't even think this is necessarily necessary, but this is a thing you can do. I kind of like said, here's my framework for doing this. And as I refine this, if people think this is interesting, I'll be happy to provide this document, maybe a refined one. And then I just loaded that in here. And then the last really key thing for me, at least, was I wrote a little backstory about my characters. Darthis, this is where I'm most excited about solo role-playing, is role-playing the characters and playing out characters that have an interesting story and personality and stuff like that. This is not necessary, but this gives a lot more context to NotebookLM of what I'm trying to do. So I just wrote out Darthis's history. He's basically like raised as an assassin, growing up on the streets in Alderland and the Forbidden Lands. This could be anything you want. This could be anything about your setting, anything that's unique. Just writing it in narrative. For me, this isn't that different than you're like gonna play a tabletop RPG session with a DM and you like write up a character concept. Um, so then I wrote up like what he's trying to do. Basically, he and Joker were part of an old regiment or a army regiment in Alderland, and they were being sent as sort of like special forces into the Forbidden Lands to try to find out information about Zytera, who's like the big bad in Forbidden Lands, and find some sort of artifact to destroy it. And so they're like just starting their adventure as they pass the Iron Lock, which is the separation between Alderland and the Forbidden Lands. So I wrote this up and I passed it as another document here. And what this means is now I have everything. This AI is now aware of everything necessary to consult with me about about the system and my adventure here. It's not going to act as a GM. That is me. That is really like the plot unfolding machines. And you could actually like you can leverage this as much drizzle as you want. That's probably its own video. But I'm going to start with just what I did here to lift some of the burden for myself of having to do all that world building and stuff in the unfolding machines. So basically, I loaded all this in, and I basically just said here, I'm doing the solo RPG process. If you reference things, it knows to look at these documents. So I'm saying I'm using the solo RPG process to do this story based on the story Ballad of the Wraith in the Forbidden Lands setting. So I'm kind of giving it context of what I'm trying to do. And then I said, basically, the PUM companion software is asking me for a game proposal, a story pitch, a brief summary. I could totally write this by myself. But what I was trying to experiment with here is like, how quickly could I use this tool to populate the stuff necessary for the unfolding machines with all this stuff, like everything about my story, about Darthus and Joker, what they're trying to do, but also everything about Forbidden Lands, right? Again, you could tweak this as much as you want. You can add, or the great thing about unfolding machines is it recommends like creating these plot nodes. You can get, I mean, it recommends to have like less than 10, but I don't know how I just closed this. Oh, that's a ribbon, I guess. There we go. Yeah, it recommends to have like less than 10 of some of these, but you can add or remove any that you want. But what I did, just to see how quickly I could get this off the ground, was I came in here and said, give me a game proposal. So it summarized the universe of the Forbidden Lands, my protagonists, the goal or problem of what we're trying to do. It actually messed up in this original thing because it got kind of confused that I didn't say that the Ballad of the Wraith were the characters I was playing, so it started I had to correct it here. I said, I'm asking for the summary proposal. Use the Ballad of the Wraith as its core. It's about my character, Darthus. I had to tell it. I was not clear that this Ballad of the... It thought this was just a story. I had to say, this is my character. So then it came up with a really clear Forbidden Lands and the Iron Lock, protagonists, Darthus and Wraith, goal or problem, the mandate of Zytera. It says like what I'm trying to do. Again, I could write this myself, but I reviewed it and I thought it was a pretty good summary of what this story was about, so I dropped that here in the game proposal. And then I did that for each of these elements. So you can see I said, okay, now I'm being asked about game world elements. And look at this table it produced. Again, I could edit this, I could ignore this, I could take from this as much as I want or not, but it's got custom stuff here about the Forbidden Lands and being a rich history of conquest, wars, and nefarious deeds. Things are discovered by legends. Darthus and Joker are actively seeking a legend about a powerful artifact and information about Zytera. Harsh survival environment, fragmented kin, and deep distrust. So a lot of this is stuff that it pulled from the Forbidden Lands source materials itself, but then it's also feeding in little things about my characters, like the Iron Lock and the Alderlander perspective, which is like that my character is from Alderland and is like that I'm in a foreign place, a hostile the Ravenlands. So it's feeding in like stuff about the setting and about my quests. And what I did is I just dropped every single one of these as a note in here. So I'm not going to walk through all these, but I basically just did this for every one of these. I said, help me fill out the potential obstacles part of PUM. And because it has PUM in here, it knows what potential obstacles is. It knows what that section is about. And so it did the same thing. It said, based on your objectives and the hostility of Forbidden Lands, here's a list of potential obstacles. Again, I could grab any of these. I just for expedience, I just literally drop them in as nodes. So we have Zytera's opposition, Rust Brother fanatics. These are all things that Wraith's Past catches up. I love this one. It's like grabbed from my story that perhaps because I was had a background of a former soldier or was an assassin, maybe my enemies from my past might show up again. So this is something then the plot unfolding machine can just pop into situations. I'll be in a scenario and it's like your patch catches up to you. So I consider this as an assist, right? I consider this like the DM. I'm telling the DM knows about the world. I'm saying this is what my character's about, and the DM's like, here are some things that might be interesting in the story, or they're like taking notes in the background and thinking of ways that. And I could say I don't like that. I don't want to. I don't. This doesn't really fit my character, and I could tweak it. But this is doing so much work for me to provide inspiration. And if I want, I mean, it's got like a little thing about here about like a territorial spirit, a local godling. Another reason I'm excited about this is instead of loading in Forbidden Lands, or in addition to loading in Forbidden Lands, you could load in like a pre-made adventure, some sort of pre-made story, and you could say, source the events and specific beats and stuff like that from this pre-made adventure. And it solves the problem, at least to some extent, of you as a solo role player needing to read through an entire prepared adventure and like spoil it for yourself in order to pull things in. You could just, I'm actually trying to find a more streamlined way to load this into the unfolding machines um, without manually copying and pasting them in. But even if I copy and paste, I'm not reading it. I'm just kind of, unless I want to review it. But if I'm doing the thing of like, I want things to be surprising, I can literally just put these in sight unseen, and it's a surprise to me, which is something that almost never happens in solo role playing. Like, I could be going along and it's like, this event happens, and it's tailored to my character's history. It's tailored to the particular adventure I'm doing, and I've potentially never seen it before, which is almost impossible in solo role playing right now. And then the neat thing about this, some people really, I mean, I dig it, like having the physical books next to you. If something comes up here, you could then like go to that section of the book and read a bit more about it and integrate as much as you want. It'd be like, oh, it's bringing up like Zytera and his like lieutenant is now showing up. So like you can go to the solo role play, the actual source book and like flip through and be like, oh, what is okay? Yeah, this is cool, and then like integrate something into the story. So I did it here with potential obstacles. I told it to limit it to 10. Again, these are all like custom to Forbidden Lands or my character. Useful findings, did the same thing. Pending questions. This is actually the one I felt the weirdest about. Like this is supposed. I think there's definitely some benefit in the unfolding machines system to say like, what are your pending questions? Because the idea is that eventually it'll like pop up and say like you find something about a question that you're curious about. So it benefits you to put questions in here that you are invested in, that you do want to find out, that compel you about your story, because it'll move the story in an interesting direction. But a neat thing about this is it's bringing in a bunch of stuff from the Forbidden Land setting, like the stand and gist and things that I wasn't really aware of. I mean, look at this one. Like a political saboteur. Who among the Alderlander court is actively supporting or financing the mission that we're on? And who is the specific plotting courtier seeking to undermine or betray them? Like, whoa, this is so cool for me. It's like it brings in something from the element about a plotting courtier, and that there's some maybe someone's financing this mission or has some alternate thing against us. And then I did this with notable characters too. Like there's a section in, you don't have to do this. This is optional, but you can have characters who can show up. Darthus, Joker, Zytera, Marigold. These are things. There's the plotting courtier that it like pulled in from the previous thing. These different elements from Forbidden Lands, which then you could go look up in the books. Interesting locations. So these are all again sourced in the material. So I could do this myself. I could read through every single Forbidden Lands book and pull out interesting scenarios, interesting NPCs, and more power to people who want to go that deep. That is fully supported in the system that I'm describing. You could look at this and be like, I like that one, but the rest I'm going to make my own. Or you could ignore this yourself, or entirely. So this is kind of the meat of how to use this particular tool. to populate the world and the adventure that you're doing with stuff that's relevant. So I'll show you the outcome of this, which is, let me go back to that was just a sort of, blank setup. But this is my adventure. This is some art that I created here. And if I go to this plot thing on the side, you can see all these things are here ready as like tables to be pulled in to my adventure from Forbidden Lands, from stuff relating to my characters. And again, I'm not going to go through the details of the enfolding machine, but when you do a random prompt, it either pulls kind of a somewhat generic but specific prompt from the setup stuff in the enfolding machines, or it can dip into your custom plot stuff. And the neat thing about enfolding machines is you can continue to add to this. If some new element gets revealed or some new obstacle, you can add or remove stuff from these tables. But this provides for me such a rich starting point of adventures. So let me see, what else haven't I covered as part of this process? I mean, obviously you can see here, this part is I think known to most people, but just if you're not super familiar with it and you don't mind doing AI image generation, I did some image generation for my characters. So one thing I did is I fed in a couple of the covers of books from Forbidden Lands and said, and then I'll just show it. I'm speaking abstractly. So I was using Gemini. You could use ChatGPT, whatever. I just made a thread and I basically passed in my story at the start, Ballad of the Wraith, along with some cover novels to capture the art style from Forbidden Lands, and then said make a character portrait for Darthus based on this story and the art, and then made one for Joker as well. I actually asked it to tweak Darthus so he had daggers. And then Joker, I said, integrate the part of him like being jovial and all this stuff. He's a little bit creepy looking, but it is Forbidden Lands. Then when I shifted to doing sort of, I did one for Zytera, but when I shifted to the character and location art, again, I fed in some art from, some line art from the inside of the Forbidden Lands books and said, like, make a portrait for Rust Prince Cartorda, the plotting courtier, the Empress Soria, Garkle the Dwarven Ghost, which are all things that had come in through that generation. Then I wanted to make some art for the location, so I fed in some location art from the Forbidden Lands books of the Hollows and Weatherstone, and asked it to like make a picture of the Iron Lock, and that's how I got also like the picture of our characters walking away from the Iron Lock that I integrated here. So once you have this fed in here, you have this this sort of understanding of the art style and things like that, and it's very easy then to go in there and just say like, okay, this is what's happening in my story, illustrate this in this art style. And so like the first event that I had going on here, just to show like how all this came together, I could go into a whole thing about this plot unfolding machines and stuff. I'm just starting, but again, I sat down with all this and I was like, okay, I have an idea that we just passed by the Iron Lock, but like what is happening? Like I know they've just dropped us down. So I can like invoke a scene opener from over here and say like, okay, what is, like, I don't know anything. What's next? And it's like, take a look at the weather or atmospheric conditions. So I was like, okay, maybe it's, drizzling, annoying rain. And then I said, what's an interesting location feature? Peculiar absence of typical sounds or movement. So I drop in a picture, and then I say, Darthus and Joker winch down the Iron Lock. The world of Alderland close behind them as the silent manning the wall turn away. They look out at the expanse cleared in front of the wall on the Forbidden Lands side and see nothing aside from the piles of bleached bones and a cleared expanse, no movement, eerily silent aside from the sizzling sound of an annoying light rain and a slight smell of rot. Where did I get the rest of this? Maybe you're the type of person that like can just come up with this sort of writing on yourself and what's going on. I will say, and this is again completely optional, I went back to this thread which understands everything about my story and everything that's going on, and I basically said, okay, Wraith and Joker just entering through the Iron Lock. What would they likely see? What would their experience be? And again, remember, this has all the context of Forbidden Lands, what the Iron Lock is, my character's story. And so this is just inspiration. It tells me a bit about the Iron Lock. It tells me that there's a littered ravine on the other side with bones of people who have been potentially killed by the Silent that they'd ignore their warnings. There's these silent watchers up above. It even mentioned the smell, like a thematic atmosphere, the smell of rot, etc. So I took from that what felt relevant and brought it in. Um, and so I was like, okay, here they are. They're at the other side of this thing. What are they doing? They're gonna obviously my goal is to go find out stuff about this artifact in Zyterra. So I'm just saying they set off down the road. So now we're at the thing of like, okay, I'm walking down the road. What happens next? I could like start rolling on random prompt tables and things like that. But the neat thing about the unfolding machines is I can just say, oh, I had a little thing here saying this is part of the scene. So you can like, I did a scene opener and then I said intervention, which is like the middle of the scene. And it says points to an object that reflect the past or history. I could have gone further with this, but I just said, okay, let's look. That can. I wanted to emphasize the bones that I'd ignore the silence warnings. Okay, so then I was like, okay, they're moving down the road. Um, this would be a place where I might just get stopped in solo roleplaying because I'm like, what do I do next? So I then did. I know what's going to happen next. They're walking down the road, but I don't know what they're going to find or what is how that might be modified. So one of the core things of the unfolding machines is when you're trying to figure out what's happening next in the plot, you can say, give me a random prompt, and that will like give you a literal like this situation happens, or here's something from your plot stuff from all these tables over here. But you can also do modify a proposal, which is like you have an idea of what's happening, but you want to make it more interesting or have a tweak. So I did that because I'm like, okay, they're walking down the road, but does something happen? What goes on? So I do modify a proposal, and it says increase the intensity and tension. So it's like, okay, this is not vague, like keyword prompts. This is literally saying like they're walking down the road, things get more intense. Okay, that's providing a nice flavor, but I don't know what that means in terms of like concretely what. So you have all these oracles over here. Again, the game unfolding machine is like big picture questions about your world. I didn't have to do that much of it because I used the NotebookLM to come up with a lot of that concepts. Scene unfolding machine is when you're actually actively involved in a scene and you're trying to move stuff forward. And the plot unfolding machine is moving stuff forward. So I could have done okay. So I had no idea of what that meant. Like, so I said, okay, there's going to be some kind of challenge here, right? Because it just told me to increase the intensity. So I said, scene designer, what is the core challenge? And it says the core challenge is guards. There's security present. You need to either stealth, sneak, or steal. Wow. Okay. That's there you go. So they're walking down the road. Things get more intense. How do they get more intense? There is some sort of guards or security present. And then I said, well, I don't. Again, at any point here with all this stuff, you could stop it depending on your comfort level and just like kind of move forward into narrating. But this provides a backstop, a constant backstop of concrete stuff to move stuff forward. So I was like, okay, guards, but this doesn't really make sense because I'm like just past the Iron Lock. Who would be there? I don't know much about Forbidden Lands. So I said, I went to the Oracle for the plot and said, who is this? And it said someone you relate to or know, and they look dangerous. Now this could go anywhere, right? So one thing you could do here, I'll just do this live just to see what it does. So I'm going to go back to my NotebookLM prompt here. And by the way, one really neat thing of NotebookLM, I don't even know if I went through this yet, but I also came in here and had, this is a whole other thing that I did, which I'll just hint at because I know this video is getting long. But like a big thing I skipped over is like, how do I make these Forbidden Lands characters that I've come up with in Legend of the Mist? And, surprise, surprise, I basically just said, help me come up with sort of a character profile for Wraith in the Legend of the Mist system. And so it brings in all this stuff about Alderland, all this stuff about my character, and came up with the story tags and themes, the entire character sheet basically, for Darthus and Joker, just based off of here's who these characters are, here's what they're good at, we're in the Forbidden Lands. Again, you could entirely do that. This is creative blank slate. You could do this yourself. I wanted to get in here quickly. It made an amazing, in my opinion, set of traits like haunted by the guild, horrific flashbacks, quests related to that, the Wraith persona about having an unsettled scarred eye, and hard to read, but trying to maintain his identity, raspy voice, an elite field operative, the royal mandate to stop Cytera and how that fit in. And then like the backpack tag, this tattered childhood doll, which was in my source story about like that was the one thing he kept from when he was a child. So it's like the only memento of his parents, and it says like how it could be used in Legend of the Mist as an idea. So I did that for both Darthus and Joker and fed those into the character sheets. Um, but at any point, I can come back here to consult. The plot unfolding machine gives a great like prompt, right? And if that's enough for me, you can continue to use the oracles here and be like, okay, maybe I already had an idea here. Who would I know? Maybe the idea is that I came up with is that these two are both from Alderland. They were both like former military. Maybe this is like a deserted military unit from Alderland that has turned to banditry, that is kind of not guarding, but stealing from people that are coming through the Iron Lock. And now we have to sneak past them. And what's the dynamic of the fact that they're from Alderland, and how would I want to like try to engage with them or what? So that's something I came up with. That's the great thing about the unfolding machines. You could just do that, but I will show you. Let's see what this does. So, okay, apologies there. I hit a hotkey while I was trying to type that stopped the video, so I lost about 15 minutes of recording there on the end. But I'm going to try this again. I think where I left off was that I was typing in here the summary of what was going on in the story and what had come up from the unfolding machines. So for example, Darthus and Joker are walking down the road from the Iron Lock into the Ravenlands. The intensity increases. They see something related to core, challenge, guards, or security presence, stealth, sneak, steal, and the twist is someone who you relate to, know, and their look is dangerous. Who might, or what might this be? And so I was just basically pasting in these prompts into NotebookLM. And so what it came up with here is all the stuff related to Darthus's most recent military life, the political machinations of Alderland, a proposed scenario involving an operative acting as a watcher or cat spa near the entry point. So it like brings in this whole thing of where I'm at the muddy ravine, that there are skeletons of humans and horses. It talks about the core challenge using my scout's knowledge. The intensity increases, catches a glimpse of a figure that's trying to remain unnoticed. Though they're lurking, they're a watcher. The core challenge is that, essentially it just repeats that core challenge. Failure to deal with the watcher will result in exposure. And then it adds this twist of someone I relate to or who is dangerous, and it has this idea that it's a woman in practical dark water resistant garb carrying a short sword and a hooded cloak. She's an experienced killer. Her name is Dindria, and her cover is The Bard. Why she's dangerous and known, and so it talks a bit about who the concept of this person might be: an assassin and hired thief, hired by the rulers of Alderland. She's working for the same political power structure that sent Darthus and Joker. It says her role. It makes her, she's tasked with removing traces of the old royal line, King Algarod. So this is something I could go look up in the Forbidden Lands lore, making her a cat spa. It says what she's potentially trying to do. Although she often appears jovial right now, she's dedicated to remaining stealthy. So basically then it says they've been spotted by an agent, they must take action, they can sneak, etc. If they fail their stealth roll, they get exposure. And how it might impact things, including triggering the plotting courtier obstacle. So, I mean, you wouldn't have to use 90% of this. You could, first of all, you could just look at this and be like, it could spark ideas for you. You could also ask NotebookLM to just say, give me 5 different ideas of who this might be, and you choose one. But what is amazing to me here is it's integrating the inputs, the stimulus from the unfolding machine with the background knowledge of my character and what our characters are doing and Forbidden Lands, and then coming up with something that is very in lore as a potential idea. So how much more detailed is this than even like something that might pop up from the unfolding machines? Um, so the idea here, or the point, is that this is an option. You could, if you wanted to run this narrative relatively autonomously, you could just use this directly. You could even say, please summarize this, and you can throw it into the narrative if you like it. Or you can just ignore it, or you can use it as an inspiration for what might be going on. So to me, that's really powerful. I'm not sure if I'll use that idea coming from NotebookLM or my idea about the regiment. I could also pass my idea to NotebookLM and say flesh this out, or link this to stuff that's in the history of Forbidden Lands to make it a little bit more fleshed out. Again, you can kind of treat NotebookLM, or rather the outputs of NotebookLM as part of the role of a dungeon master, which is to understand deeply the world and come up with narrative ideas. But as opposed to a dungeon master, where you might not want to say to them, I don't like that, that's dumb, I'm going to go with my own idea. You can do that here, and that's the joy of solo role-playing. So I wanted to say one more thing about NotebookLM. I know this video is getting long. One thing that's important to note if you do try to use this system is that there is no chat history beyond your current window in NotebookLM, meaning if I close this out and come back, I won't be able to re-access this chat. It's actually kind of a weird, I don't know why it's like that, but maybe just because we're kind of extending what this thing is being used for. So what I strongly recommend is if something comes up that's really important, like for example, these character profiles of Joker or Darthus, you can, at the end of the list, you can do save to note, which will add it over here. So I have the Joker character profile, I have the Darthus character profile, and I can look at them at any time or reference them. And then what I think is best practice, if you've come to like kind of the end of a series of situations or whatever, you can either, what I would probably do is I would paste in what's happened in the plot unfolding machine. I actually don't know how you can get a copy of all of this, but I'm sure that there is. I know you can also like export it out to a PDF. Honestly, that's what I would probably do. Just whenever you actually don't even really need to worry about your conversation history here about what's happened and such, because what has happened is what has been put into the unfolding machine's narrative. So at any point you can export that chat from unfolding machines and you can load it in here as a source. You could also ask NotebookLM to create a summary, but it might bring in stuff that was kind of like you were spitballing with it that's not real. The output is what is in the unfolding machines app. So if you just export that out and you drop it back in here as a source, NotebookLM has complete memory or knowledge of what's happened in your story so far, so that it could operate even more functionally in this way. So I think that's maybe where I'll stop the illustration of the idea. I obviously haven't experimented with this a lot, but I'm really enjoying where this is going. To sort of summarize what the main concept is, I haven't drawn a graphic for this yet, but if you think about it, there's like the RPG core systems, right? And what I'm proposing is that Legend in the Mist is a narrative-focused, portable core systems structure that is very amenable to solo play, that could be applied to any game environment or game system, RPG rulebook. Then you have sort of the narrative brain that is part of the GM role, that is saying, where are we at in the story? What's happening right now? What twist is happening? Should we talk? What is the next step in the narrative, essentially? And that's really offloaded to the wonderful unfolding machines frameworks. Whether you're thinking about high-level plot points, whether you want to know like what's next in the scene, all that stuff. It keeps coherence between what's going on, what happened before, and what's going to happen next. And it's something that AI really falters on, which is introducing like little twists or little prompts or whatever. So, and then the fact that it can continue to fold in stuff from that you've chosen for your world and your background, makes this sort of the mechanical brain of managing the plot. And it's also just this app is an amazing way to record your story and your solo RPG session. And then you could stop right there. That is like the start of my proposal, is like a portable system that you could take to any RPG setting. But if, like me, you're somebody that doesn't want to read the entire setting book ahead of time and have that encyclopedic knowledge of the setting, or you sometimes get stuck with even this level of, maybe you have some general ideas, but you want some help kind of fleshing out the story because you want to focus on the role playing and playing. That's where NotebookLM comes in, where you can feed in the unfolding machines, Legend of the Mist, if you want it to help you with that stuff. Or you don't even have to give it any of that. If it's bare minimum, you could just give it the RPG books and your little setup story, and then it acts as kind of like a narrative consultant to flesh out the prompts that are coming from plot unfolding machines. But what's great about this way is it's not like taking over like you would if you tried to just do a Dungeon Master system with ChatGPT. You don't have to worry about, does it remember X, Y, and Z, or like, does it? Is it gonna take me in a weird direction? Because you're still in control of the overall flow of the story. You're allowed to pick and choose what is relevant to your experience. And it still frees you up to, like, when I saw, what was that thing about the cat's paw to a particular king, I can go look that up in the book and like, oh, no, that's interesting, and it can spark ideas for me. Like, you can fold this in as much as you want because it's acting as a consultant rather than the central brain of the process, which is handled by this. So my thought process, and I'm curious to hear what people think in the comments, but like, I feel like this structure of like portable game system that's narrative focused and narrative engine that is generalized and can be applied to any sort of setting or anything, and then NotebookLM, which integrates the RPG setting, your story, etc., and does the elaboration part that you could do yourself, or it can act as sort of like a narrative consultant, like a dungeon master. I feel like at this point, most of the things that are missing of not having a dungeon master are emulated, and emulated in a relatively straightforward, portable way. Yeah, one thing that I was thinking as I was reading through this, so let's say, I like this idea of the cat's paw that's here. I could, take this, and it's very easy to make a Legend of the Mist character for this. Like in many systems, I would have to let's roll up her stats, and you need to know all this stuff. No, you just need to know a few tags that are relevant for her, and then that's all you really need to know in order to have combat with her, interact with her, because you just need to know what tags she has to relate to yours. But I can say, help me generate a challenge profile for, what was her name? She was called the Bard or something like that. Dindria. Let's see what this does. In Legend, I can just say a Legend in the Mist challenge profile for Dindria. Legend in the Mist. Let's see what this does. I have never done this, but I'm suspecting it'll do relatively well. Again, once you understand the Legend of the Mist system, you could just do this offhandedly, come up with any relevant tags and things like that. But let's see. So we've got, I'm not going to dive deeply into this, but it's got like some of her, what level she might be. There in Legend of the Mist, there's like Origin, Might, and I think Greatness, which is the power that they have. You need limits when you're engaging with them. So like, in order to, one of the things that's neat about challenge profiles in Legend of the Mist is it gives you different ways that you can engage with a challenge. Like, you might be able to, in this case, harm. If you can inflict a 3 harm status, then you can defeat them through damage. If you inflict a 2 convince status, then you can defeat her through convince. If you inflict a 5 catch or escape status, which you can see they're making these more challenging or easier depending on. So there's a whole, again, Legend of the Mist is a really neat system. I'm not going to go into this, but you can sort of do anything that you feel like would be reasonable to harm, convince, or catch or escape, and then think about which of your story tags might impact her. But here's the tags that she has. thief and assassin hired by Alderaan, stealthy assassin, fiddle and short sword, cover and weapon. And then her statuses: jovial demeanor, conspiring, 2. And then it has the various threats that she could do. Threats are things that challenges can do that you need to deal with. So, like, there's this threat of stalk, that she might stalk you, she might observe, she might strike, she might try to deceive. And then what are the consequences? And then some special feature here that she can, impersonate or cover, etc. This was literally off of a single sentence where I just said, give me a challenge profile. So again, I could not do this at all. You don't have to do challenge profiles. You can just kind of like operate off of story tags. At this point, I used some concept that NotebookLM had come up with, but I could also just come up with my own thing. I could say my personal idea of the like band of Alderlanders. I could come in here and say, I'm facing up against a band of Alderlanders. Help me do a challenge profile for them. And I could just run with it. So yeah, this is just showing some of the power of NotebookLM if you want to get nitty gritty with this stuff. And I didn't orient it to any of this. All I did was pass in the documents, and I just have to know enough to say, like, get a challenge profile for this person. Okay, so I'm going to call it there. Hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully this sparked some ideas. Challenge me, like, let me know if this feels like something that would be useful to you, if you feel like there's something missing, like, oh, this, discards too much of the nitty-gritty mechanics that I like for RPGs. I don't see how I could swap those in. Any thoughts are welcome. If this seems interesting, I'm happy to try to, show this in play a little bit. As I mentioned, I'm just starting. And if it works out, hopefully I can do this with a few different game systems. But yeah, that is where I'm going to call this video right now. I'm sure this is a long one, and I will talk to you all later.